This is a story about how I brought a statue to life using VFX without being a VFX artist. Let me explain. So this is me. I'm a professional video editor. I say professional not because I'm extremely good at it, but I do earn my money as a filmmaker and I drink lots of coffee, which makes me a pro. I also like to play around with VFX, especially with Cinema 4D and After Effects, and I was able to develop some serious skills in Cinema 4D. Since I spend a lot of time in front of the screen, I try to force myself to occasionally go for a run. You know, like trying to stay in shape and shit.
Yo, what the fuck is this? What the fuck is this?
So as I soar through the wind like a lone eagle, I still have the same target in mind. Specifically, the pier, which is my favorite spot in my hometown. When I get there, I walk past the same statue. And it got me thinking one day, could I be able to scan the statue using photogrammetry and bring it back to life, like make it dance or something? So I ran back home. I had a few challenges to overcome. The most difficult part was getting rid of my doubts about my abilities, so I started watching a bunch of tutorials. I couldn't seem to shake my doubts off. If anything, I had even more doubts.
I'm not gonna make it!
But at least I had a starting point. I planned to take several pictures of the statue and import them in a photogrammetry software like Mushroom to generate a 3D model. I also wanted to implement some other hobbies, so I decided to record and master a funky track myself using Logic Pro X. Next, I would have to get some footage of me doing some silly things and also get some clean plates for later tracking in After Effects. The last step would be to rig the statue using Mixamo animations. If everything works out, I should be able to export my scene using Octane, composite everything back in After Effects, edit in Premiere Pro, and I'm done. Sounds easy, right? Wrong. I realized I needed assistance.
I need your help.
Meet my brother Hector. He's a drug addict, and he has a PhD in thermodynamics.
See.
Don't worry, he's just gonna hold the camera. Now that we have everything set, let me explain step 1, photogrammetry and what it is. Photogrammetry gathers measurements and data about an object by analyzing the change in position from two different images. It means you can take a bunch of photos of real-world objects and transform them into a 3D object without having to invest in costly equipment. The only drawback is that reflective surfaces can't be scanned because, well, they're reflective. You don't have stable points for the software to track. The statue I wanted to scan was not too bad except for two things: the pose and the missing information. You see, when scanning humans or human-like objects for animations, you preferably want them standing in a T-pose, away from any other objects. That's because it's way easier to rig them up for animation. A rig is just a skeleton driving the animation of the character. Since I don't have the time or the patience to animate the rig myself, I need to put the statue in a T-pose for it to work with Mixamo. Mixamo, on the other hand, is a library of thousands of full-body character animations. You simply upload your character, choose an animation, and you're done. But my statue is far from perfect. The legs are crossed and kinda stuck together, and the backside is no backside. Because he's leaning on the wall, there's no information for me to scan. So to have a full mesh, I'll have to find out how to close the gaps and remove excess information. Now remember, if you're a pro VFX artist, this might be an easy task for you, but it almost seems impossible for me. Not only that, but I've never seen someone taking this approach. There are a lot of videos about scanning people, for example Cinecom, but they always have the character standing in a T-pose, so I might be the first one. That should justify a few hundred hours of work. Speaking of which, let's get started. My first thought was to shoot a long high frame rate video and export that as a JPEG sequence. But I read that Mushroom uses metadata from the camera to correct optical distortion. So I went with the traditional way and took about 200 pictures with my Sony a6300, trying to hit every possible angle. I choose a gloomy day to provide even lighting and avoid hard shadows. This makes it easier for the software to track points and doesn't bake the lighting into the texture, as I want the light to scene myself. Now I'll simply drop my photos into Mesh Room and let the app do the rest. This is a time-consuming procedure depending on your machine. Mine took a whole day. In the meanwhile, I went back to grab some HDRIs. HDRI is short for High Dynamic Range. It's a special kind of image that contains much more color information than normal images. They are created by combining several pictures of the same scene with different exposures. With special equipment like the Insta360, panoramas can be created. These are especially useful for 3D visualization as they actually capture the real-world lighting of the entire environment. These panoramic HDR images can be used in 3D programs to act as a light source to illuminate your scene, creating very natural lighting effects. Now that I shot my different exposures, I'll need to combine them into a single 32-bit HDRI map using the Insta360 software and Photoshop. This part was easy. Now comes the hard part. Mesh Room is done calculating my image and the result is actually not that bad. It's even better than I expected. You clearly recognize the statue. We have some bumps here and there that I need to clean up, but now you see the missing information I was talking about earlier. There are a couple of things I need to do now. The first one is to reduce the polygons as the object has way too many vertices to be usable. Doing so makes working with it much faster and doesn't require as much horsepower. Ideally, you also want a good looking mesh with natural edge flow and quads instead of triangles. I have to educate myself on that topic, so I'll be back when I'm done. Here's a message from Hector.
You're on camera now.
What am I supposed to say? Huh?
Man, get that shit out of your face.
There's nothing on my nose. It's medicine for flu. Subscribe to Urban Geeks for more awesome tech videos like this. See? And what else? See.
Okay, so now that I have the scan ready, I'll import it in Cinema 4D to do some cleanup. By just selecting the polygons I don't need and deleting them. What's left over is just a statue without the ledge. Here you can see the missing information I was talking about earlier. He has no ass. It's an assless statue. That's a problem. We don't want any assless statues around here. I also need to fix the hands because they look like a pile of dog and the forearms need rebuilding too. But how? I'm absolutely clueless at this point, and nothing makes sense. Since no one ever tried it before, there's little to no information online. At some point, I even tried mailing Clint from Corridor Crew, but he didn't answer, so f*** you, Clint. I'm just kidding, okay? I need you, I love you, no offense. But I found one video from Chris Schmidt talking about photogrammetry and volume builder, which helped a lot. With the volume builder, I can fix the holes and make a complete mesh. The only thing is I still need to fix the pose. After hours of Googling, I decided to do it on my own. This technique is probably not the best, so don't take my word for it. I imported the standard C4D figure as a reference and started to slice the statue, separating the limbs. Now, I will rearrange the parts and align them to the figure, which is in a perfect T-pose. Now, I have this. Looks awful, so I have to even out the surface a bit. With the C4D modeling tools, I'm gonna iron out, inflate, deflate the surface in a manner that looks okay for me. The next step is to fix the mesh with instant meshes. This one is pretty easy. Just upload the model, tell it how many vertices you want, give it some instructions on edge flow, tell it to use quads, and I'm done. Now it's time to test the model if it works with Mixamo. If this fails, I'm gonna jump off a cliff. So take the model, upload it, and it works! It actually fucking works. I can tell Mixamo where the joints are and I have a moving statue. Awesome. But we still have work to do. As you can clearly see, there's no texture on it because I can't use the old texture from the scan. The reason being that it's a different pose with a different poly count. Now normally you would want to UV unwrap the model, but the texture is pretty simple, so I went with retexturing myself in Octane, which is also a good exercise for me. Before we do that, we need to track the actual footage first. In After Effects, we drop the camera tracker onto the footage, track the scene, set ground plane and origin, create a camera and solid, normalize the scene, and export everything to Cinema 4D. I know this is kind of quick, but it's basically just a step-by-step instruction I used from Clint over at Corridor Crew. So check him out if you want a more professional approach. With that being said, I can import my animated statue and place it on top, texture everything and bring it back to After Effects. But there's a problem. My texture is f***ed up. For some reason, my texture is dancing around and it's not fixed to the model. More hours of googling and troubleshooting. At this point, I've hit a spiritual low. So many hours invested just to get some buggy textures. I called it a day. Maybe I'll have some more inspiration tomorrow. That was a good call. because the next day I found a solution that seemed impossible in a couple of minutes. It was just switching the texture tag and the octane material to UV. And that's something you should always consider. If you're stuck with a problem, don't try to force it. Step back, take a break, and come back with a clearer mind. We're almost there. There's only one more thing we need to do. Record a funky track. So open up Logic Pro X, grab the bass, record some bass lines, program some drums, add keys and cheesy vocals, and we get this.
Feel some love in the night, cause I'm about to get high. Do you wanna feel some love in the night, cause I'm about to get high. Do you wanna feel some love in the night, cause I'm about to get high. Do you wanna feel some love in the night, cause I'm about to get high. What you got, you gotta give it to your mama. What you got, you gotta give it to your papa. What you got, you gotta give it to your daughter. Do a little dance and then drink a little water. What you got, you gotta get it, put it in you. What you got, you gotta get it, put it in you. What you got, you gotta get it, put it in you. Willing with the feeling, don't stop to continue. Do you wanna feel some love in the night, cause I'm about to get high. Do you wanna feel some love in the night, cause I'm about to get high. Do you wanna feel some love in the night, cause I'm about to get high. Do you wanna feel some love in the night, cause I'm about to get high.
Okay, I'm done. I hope you liked the video. Please consider subscribing because this one took way too long to make. And yeah, I would appreciate it if you smash that motherfucking like button. See you in the next one. Peace.
What do I have to say?